There's a reason most relationship horror fails. Not because it lacks blood, not because it lacks cruelty, but because it refuses to admit something fundamentally humiliating about human intimacy. Love is not a union. It is an exposure event. Most horror films treat relationships as collateral damage. The couple exists, so the demon has someone to torment. The marriage exists, so the ghost has a house to haunt. But the films we're discussing tonight go somewhere much darker. These are stories where intimacy itself becomes the infection, where love mutates into dependency, where trust collapses into paranoia, where emotional exposure slowly erodes identity until the person beside you no longer feels human at all. This is not horror about monsters invading relationships. This is horror about relationships becoming monsters. And no film understood that better than Possession. Possession is often described as a divorce film disguised as horror. That description is too small. This is a film about emotional decay becoming biological. Everything inside Possession feels infected. The apartment sweats. Food rots in corners. Walls resemble diseased tissue. Every argument feels less like communication and more like nervous systems attacking each other directly. The marriage is no longer a relationship. It's an organism trying to survive by consuming the people trapped inside it. Anna's grotesque creature hidden in the apartment isn't just a monster. It's replacement fantasy. A new partner without contradiction, without resentment, without emotional history. A cleaner human. And that's the truly disturbing idea at the center of the film. Not that love fails, but that intimacy can become so psychologically exhausting that the mind begins fantasizing about simpler substitutes. The famous subway sequence captures this perfectly. It doesn't feel like a breakdown. It feels like cellular rejection. Like the body itself can no longer contain emotional contamination. And that's what Possession understands better than almost any horror film ever made. Trauma does not remain psychological forever. Eventually the body absorbs it. Stress becomes illness. Resentment becomes tension. Emotional decay becomes physical architecture. By the end of the film, reconciliation is impossible. Only replacement remains. People call the thing a monster movie. It's actually a film about trust dying. The creature is terrifying because it imitates perfectly, which means paranoia becomes rational. Every interaction turns into threat assessment. Who's infected? Who's pretending? Who's still human? But the real horror is this. The thing wins long before assimilation is complete. It wins the moment trust becomes impossible. And that's why the film feels so disturbingly similar to real relational collapse. Once suspicion enters a relationship, every behavior becomes evidence. Silence becomes evidence. Tone becomes evidence. Distance becomes evidence. People begin interpreting each other through fear instead of familiarity. And eventually the relationship no longer needs a monster. The paranoia becomes self-sustaining. That's why the blood test scene feels so unbearable. Not because of violence, but because biology itself becomes unreliable. The body no longer guarantees identity. And beneath all of this sits one horrifying realization. You can spend years beside another person and still never truly know what's operating behind their face. Annihilation takes relationship horror to its final form. The shimmer doesn't destroy people through force. It refracts them. DNA merges. Memory destabilizes. Identity dissolves. And the most disturbing part is that the process feels almost beautiful, because the film understands something deeply uncomfortable. Human beings are naturally drawn towards self-destruction when identity becomes unbearable. Every character entering the shimmer is already collapsing internally. Grief, addiction, infidelity, self-hatred. The environment simply accelerates what already exists inside them. Again, the external threat is only the delivery mechanism. The real infection was already there. And that's why the ending feels so unsettling. Not because of the doppelgangers, but because the film quietly suggests identity may never have been stable to begin with. Only imitation, only adaptation, only patterns repeating themselves through different bodies. Humans are not fixed beings resisting chaos. We are temporary arrangements of chaos pretending to be permanent. The reason these films linger is because they expose recognizable truths stripped of comforting language. Dependency, projection, assimilation, emotional contagion. Human beings are porous. Every relationship changes us. Every intimacy leaves residue. Every prolonged exposure reshapes the nervous system in ways we barely understand, which means the boundary between self and other was never truly stable. Just temporary scaffolding, a survival fiction. And perhaps the most terrifying realization of all is this: the infection was never external. It was already inside the organism. Sweet dreams.